304.
And we have a recovering. He's looking good.
Yeah, he's getting better at it.
Yeah, I went to work and somebody came and looked out and said, hey, you're bleeding out everywhere.
Okay, Roberta, you want to call the roll?
Director Getty,
Present.
Director Finch,
He's on his way. He's on his way.
Director Warwick,
I'm here.
Chair Davis,
Here?
Peter?
Director Gilkey.
You there, Peter?
He's muted.
I'm up. I'm here too.
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, thank
Yeah, we
you.
can now.
Okay, I do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's see.
Pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, director announcements. Peter, do you have anything from the mutuals?
Roberta, you have another copy of the agenda?
Can you hear me, Peter?
Nothing except it's pretty rainy up here in Bellingham.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes. Jim isn't here yet. Bill, City of Ojai.
Oh, let's just go. I
Bob?
don't want to even start.
Yeah, we don't have that much time.
Nothing on the community facility district.
And I don't have anything to report on Casitas. General manager comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an update. Today is the last day of the governor's emergency powers related to the Brown Act. And so after today, directors, as I understand it, are going to have to follow the normal Brown Act rules, which means you can be on an off-site, but I think it's got to be within the jurisdiction, or maybe not, but at least if you are off-site, it's got to be posted and the public has to have availability at that location. So I'll get more details. What I would suggest, so it means really the director should be here for the meeting. I'll get more details on it, but the last thing I just wanted to mention, the Zoom teleconferencing will still be available, and I'm going to plan to move forward with having that available for the members of the public who wish to attend the meeting without having to physically come here. So unless I hear any objections, I'm going to continue to do that for the meetings. Okay. That's all I have.
I have a question, though. Will that be limited to the OBGMA, or is that going to be for the meetings that we're going to have when we start discussing the water plan? Both?
I would recommend both. Because, one of the problems, since we're still in this COVID process, is aside from masking, we're still trying to do social distancing and things like that. By having the Zoom teleconferencing available, that will assist us keep us from having a packed council chambers.
Okay. I just have one, and I don't know the exact answer, but my understanding was the governor did extend the period that we could meet by Zoom last week.
Yeah, and I've been gone for a month, so I haven't heard, but
think it's-
I'll find out for sure, and I'll just broadcast an email.
Yeah, it's
Let you know what
AB
we can do.
361.
SB?
AB
AB.
and order number 2920. Well,
Yes.
that's the one that expires.
Right.
AB 361 extended something, so.
Okay, I'll look into it and let everybody know.
Okay. For the record, Director Jim Finch is present. Okay, next item, Basin status report.
Thank you, Chair Hages. Trey, if you can bring that up.
I think I can do this today. Yeah, let's just see what they get it to. I might just. So, is it your computer? Well,
That'll work. Thank you very much. Today we're almost a week into the fall season, past the autumnal equinox, and it's pretty darn welcome in a lot of ways. Hydrologically, it's typically now when we start to see water levels change from their summertime recession to an asymptotic and or reversal, just based on the lack of evapotranspiration in a lot of the headwaters. And we're starting to see some of that here today, which is a welcome relief. However infinitesimal it may be, fall is welcome. Let's see if this works. That's a laser. Advance. So the technical fun we're having now is that Trey is across the City Hall chamber from me, and the computer here on a slideshow that's going through Zoom to the cable. So I might have to just say, punch the next slide if you can stay on the slideshow.
the Zoom because they're having trouble also.
Okay. We could switch spaces. If there's a microphone over there, I can just operate that.
Yep, it's not me.
Okay, let's do that.
It doesn't appear to be working in slideshow mode.
Okay.
You can advance the slides.
All right.
Did you like them in their pens? Yeah. Yeah. You have
It worked with the clicker when I was tested it earlier,
Okay.
but I think you're too far away.
Thank you. All right, so there's that. 2020-21 water year. This is our input. Zero change effectively into the end of September here. And of course, we're at the 4.35 being 1947. Our 4.95 feet on the valley floor is 23.2% of our normal, which is almost 22 inches of rain at this station. Of course, this does make its way into the basin, and we monitor it via a number of wells. The key one that we're looking at is usually the Elrod well, right here. So over the course of the past several years, we're hitting the recession point, and just about where we were at the still above fall of 2018, that nadir before the relatively wet 18-19 water year that brought us near to a peak, which was doubled in 2019 to 2020. What this means in the long term is that we actually hit a little bit of a bottom by all of 0.6 of a foot in this key well over the course of the past month. We're nearly identical to last month's showing. September 27th, when this data were downloaded, we're at 174.98 feet depth to water in that key well. That's the static. It pumps frequently, as you see in the previous slide, and staying around 65% capacity, or 52,000 acre feet in the basin. Of course, a lot of the water that is in there is extracted via wells, but there is some daylighting of water in San Antonio Creek, which we map, and that flows out right around here, typically from the perch system. Now, fall's welcome. It looks a little autumnal in this image. Montgomery Creek under Creek Road. Certainly been dry for a long time. This particular year, we've got some of the autumnal foliage in our Arundo haystack there in the background is also looking very much haystack-like as it's hitting its dormant period of the year. On the discharge side, we're getting very similar conditions to preceding months in the summer. So we've got a measure where we measure the flow across this transect manually each month toward the end of the month, just before this meeting. And in this particular instance, we had 0.07 CFS. It's almost too small to measure that way, but it makes sense to what it is and how it looks visually. So what you're looking at here is all of those, since we started measuring this in summer 2019, at this particular point. This is the outflow point of the basin on San Antonio Creek, where it crosses the alluvial extent of the basin and crosses Arroyo Preta, Santa Ana Fault. The surface outflow here has ranged from the high in April 2020 of 2.8 CFS to the 0.07 that we measured this week. That means that we're extracting about between 5 and to 45 acre feet per month, or this particular water year, 2020 to 2021, an estimated 280 acre feet. This is considered conservative because it's snapshot flow. It's probably peaks somewhere around 8 a.m. based on some of the detailed stage monitoring that we've done with loggers in the creek, buried beneath some of the flows in the preceding year.
What's a logger? Just a, I don't know, something that
Okay.
logs the out.
So in our
Mute everybody?
we've digested a lot of the data that we just discussed into this chart, which you can see in the top is the rainfall at the Ojai Fire Station. The bar charts are daily inches of rainfall. So when the high rainfall in 2017, there's a lot of storms and also a lot of inches in a given day. And you can see how it's been relatively similar for 2018, 19, and 20, and then 2021 with our less than 5 inches of rainfall there. Going to the center portion of this chart, the light blue shading represents creek flow all the way across the basin. Where it is a full vertical bar, that's where the flow is continuous across the basin from Senior Canyon, Ladera, Hermitage area, along San Antonio Creek, across the basin, flowing underneath Grand Avenue Bridge and Ojai Avenue, the 150, all the way out to the exit point of the basin. But as that surface flow declines, you start to see a point at which the water will daylight. So it's finding its way as you go south, migrating down in elevation. That water elevation is commensurate with the surface water recessions. That's where those light blue squares that are connected here are indicated. And they tend to recede every year before we get the big flow, and then it continues that process every year. We had a double dose in 2020 where we had some high flows and then a dry January, February, and then we got more flows in March. But it always recedes down toward that point in elevation where it daylights at the discharge point of the basin. Now, on the darker blue in this is the Elrod well data logging data sets, and we corroborate the automatic measurements with the darker blue diamonds. And you can see how this correlates to some degree, but is not exact with what we see in either the flow from the basin and as surface flow, or some of the other water levels we'll talk about in a moment. The magenta X's, that's where we've actually measured the flow, so that's a graphical depiction of the CFS of outflow of the basin that we have shown in the previous table. Some of the other newer data that we have are the depth discrete monitoring well logger and manual measurement data. And you can see how those, for example, the yellow triangles, those are the perched aquifer system that's just kind of stably at its elevation, somewhere around 730 feet or so, 725. And then down below that, in the warmer colored triangles, those are the
Ours are
deeper
$3 now.
nested
$3.99.
casings of the depth discrete monitoring well recently constructed on South Fulton Street. We'll talk about that again in a minute. But you can see how those tend to correlate. They're clearly separate, owing to the nature of the perch system, which confines the deeper systems. Here's how that depth discrete monitoring well looks, and some of the data as we go forth. The perched aquifer system has that 14 to 15 foot elevation, or depth to groundwater rather, in its system. It's only perforated from 14 to 24 feet in
Really gonna be
that
in
upper
tar,
perched aquifer
gravel.
system. The intermediate shallow aquifer, where there is some gravel, has
Should've done that.
a depth to water some 30 feet deeper than that. Been pretty consistent since installation. Same for the intermediate deep aquifer, we're calling it. This is all within the clay system that really confines the main production aquifer, where we have depths to water of over 50 feet, and declining much more rapidly than the perched aquifer system, owing to the pumping that we see quite a bit of interference in the logger data that we've collected here so far. Now, there's that graphic of the cylinder, so you can see where the perched aquifer system is near the top, and how some of the intermediate gravels and sands are present within a dark gray clay, and the yellowish clay below that, with the main aquifer present in that lower left-hand corner, that is a much more coarse cobble and gravel matrix. Now, this we've got some blocking here. Who's in control of that?
She's trying to mute. Could everybody that's watching just mute your microphone?
Are we on mute?
I may have done it, Roberta.
Yeah, if you can close out of that, Roberta, hit that X, because I don't see that on my screen, and thank you. Because this is where it starts to get fun, again. Not that it ever stopped, right? So simply depicted here is a stiff water quality diagram chart. This is one of the ways we establish water character of water systems. Now, the larger these look, the saltier the water is, or more total dissolved solids are present. And these are then speciated to cations on the left and anions on the right. The major cation species being calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. And then on the right-hand side here are the anion species that are dominant, bicarbonate or carbonate, sulfate, and chloride. Those are the negatively charged anions that comprise the major components of water analytes. Now, the way that this is demonstrated is based on the charge character, or milliequivalents per liter, which is a summation of basically how strong the material is with respect to its electrical charge, or equivalents per liter. So the calcium anions that has 2 positive charges has its concentration that calculates the MEQL, which is a bit more than sodium or potassium, which has a single positive charge. And that's important because that character of water helps define what the makeup is with respect to recharge, with respect to residence time, and we can use this to trace water in a very simple way and inexpensively with respect to water quality analysis. So you have 2 samples that are presented here. The pink one, larger, looks like an anvil, is the perched aquifer system. That's pink, and you can see that it's a calcium dominant bicarbonate sulfate character. The Black Widow violin shaped stiff diagram in the middle is from the main aquifer system. This is the deepest of the nested casings here, and it has sodium as its dominant cation and bicarbonate and chloride as its dominant anionic species, much less sulfate, as opposed to the calcium bicarbonate sulfate that we see in the perched aquifer system. So distinctly different from a water quality standpoint. So where do we go from here? Last year we did a concordant sampling of San Antonio Creek we took water samples about every mile at the same instant in time, so concordant sampling from where water daylights all the way to Old Creek Road near the confluence with the Ventura River. This is November, so we're trying to get the least amount of any surface inflow. We're trying to get the least amount of plant uptake at the time. So it was all during a time when things were relatively quiescent in the ET world, evapotranspiration, not extraterrestrial. Now, what you'll notice here is that all of this character tends to have a calcium bicarbonate sulfate character, relatively dominant. Of the 10 samples we have here, you have the upstream in the darkest blue, and then downstream from at Old Creek Road. At that crossing, it gets generally lighter shades of blue until we have that full sample set. Now, what I like about this is that it's obviously not an identical water that's all the way flowing. It interacts and is contributed to and loses water from that system in San Antonio Creek. It passes over a number of bedrock formations that may have some spring influence as they bring in a little bit of water. But generally, what you see is a dominant calcium character for the anions and dominant bicarbonate to sulfate in the anions. So if we overlay the perched aquifer system in pink and the main aquifer system of the Ojai Basin in darker blue on that same graph, so what you're looking at now is a coalescence of these two charts that I presented previously. This picture tells 1,000 words. You've got a main aquifer system in the deeper nested depth discrete monitoring well recently constructed and just sampled this month that has that distinct violin shape, or the Black Widow sodium bicarbonate chloride character as dominant. Completely different from the calcium bicarbonate sulfate character that's present in the perched aquifer and much of the San Antonio Creek all the way down to the confluence of the Ventura River. So that's how we conclude this this presentation today, and really the discharge that we're looking at, not just with respect to volume or flow or elevation, but water quality equally important as we take a look at this and manage the basin. There we go.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. Anyone have any questions?
I certainly do. Could we go back to one of the second or third slide where we're taking a look and we're showing what the flow is and the acre feet, and we're showing the date, and we're showing 7/10, 8/10, 0.1. And so here's what my question would be. What my understanding was from the last August 31st meeting, there was information that showed that we had 8/10 flow, and that the basin level had dropped 10 feet in that period of time.
8/100ths of a CFS.
8/100ths, right, but that the basin had dropped 10 feet.
Thereabouts, yeah.
Okay. Is there any way to get some correlation between, let's say, June, July, and before you do that, if it has no relationship, because what I'm thinking is, we're talking about perched and separation and whether they're all together and the cause and effect. And if we can pump 10 feet in 1 month, or have it subside 10 feet in 1 month, and have almost exactly the same amount of stream flow at the same time in the same location, it would appear to me that they're not very much interconnected and one does not affect the other. And I think that's the entire purpose of kind of this Ventura lawsuit. And if we have that information, I would like to get that stuff out there where we can show that we dropped almost nothing in surface and we've dropped 30, 40, 50 feet in basin level. And that 30, 40, 50 feet in basin level is however many hundreds or thousands of acre feet we dropped. And look at that relationship. That's what I'm thinking is actually happening.
And that's what this graphic shows. You've got that blue, and I'll put it up here since I can. This blue line is the basin key well level. As water levels decline, you have that drop from about 735 feet elevation down to 700, let's see, that's going to be 705. So you've got those tens of feet of drop there.
30 feet, right?
And then it's horizontal here.
Right. Okay, so we drop 30 feet in a basin, we drop almost absolutely nothing
Very little
in
change,
the surface flow.
infinitesimal.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we have that somewhere because I think that's going to be a big part.
Well, I think the other thing is almost like a fingerprint, that MEQL
The,
I mean, it's almost a fingerprint that identifies.
the water
things.
quality stiff diagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these are very valuable data. And much of hydrogeology as we practice and manage is not one tool. It's not one issue. It's not just looking at the rocks. It's not just looking at a water level. It's looking at changes over time, and it's looking at water quality, and it's looking at geophysical logs, and it makes it fun.
Okay, and now the next question, since you've got all this, you brought all the fun stuff out, right? When we go back and we take a look at the 7 different chemicals, minerals we've got up there, how fast does that concentrate with the shrinkage of the basin? There's got to be some proportion of, we have a percentage of Mg or Ca to this level. So if we're at 70,000 acre feet versus 50,000, is it a direct proportional where we get where we get a real concentration? I mean, are we producing more, or where is that chemical relationship?
Sure. And this is something that's in the GSP that Trey will talk about, I'm sure, and has presented here. It's really how those chemographs change over time. Is the calcium higher when water levels are lower and more water has been extracted? And when we get a big fresh flush, is there more
Dilution.
The more dilution, and then you have a lower concentration of these analytes. And to some degree, that's true, but it tends to be within a really tight range. And that's why, as we've been discussing in preparation of the groundwater sustainability plan, is some of the undesirable results in basins is that what you're describing happens. The water levels drop and it's overdrafted, and all of a sudden you're pumping nothing but salt water. Well, that's not what we see here over the course of many years, with some exceptions and some aberrations, really, much of which may be sampling bias or water supply well maintenance or rehabilitation status. And I'm sure Trey will talk about that to some degree later.
Jordan, another way I guess to express it is just in total dissolved solids, which might be a little bit more simplistic. So when you're looking at the main aquifer versus the perched aquifer, what is the delta in total dissolved solids, and what is the hypothesis of why there's that increase? Are we really looking at water that has been pumped and then used for irrigation, or water that has been used on residential lawns and has got past the root zone, is potentially picking up total dissolved solids as it makes its way through the aquifer system and then is later discharged at the stream? Is that what the hypothesis is?
It's a good question. Total dissolved solids being all of the minerals joined up, the delta being about double. So you've got the 600 to 700 parts per million total dissolved solids in the main aquifer system, and then in that perch system it tends to be in the 1,000, 1,200, 14. So that's the delta. The hypothesis about where that comes from, there are a number of different contributing factors, as you know: residence time, sewer interface, surface water, issues of return irrigation flow, sometimes septic systems, things of that nature that are affecting what's going on really near the surface. That's the perched aquifer system. It's only 30-some feet deep.
So are there any other constituents that we should be monitoring, like nitrate or others, to kind of further describe what's going on?
There's certainly a whole dog's breakfast of what might be worthwhile to analyze. The question becomes budget. Right. Do we want to do a full isotopic analysis of some sort of nitrate speciation or oxygen isotope speciation, get ages of these waters and continue down that process? All of that can be done. It's of course expensive. The issue then becomes, well, can we just use these more simplistic TDS, stiff water quality diagrams. Boron to chloride ratio is a great one to help establish where sources of water are, and a number of other techniques. It really depends on what the directive will be from the agency to conduct that.
With the data that you have now on the samples that you took downstream on San Antonio Creek, is there any indication that there's any distinctive difference in the water as it goes downstream? I'm thinking, what are the sources of that water?
Right. So that study was done with Mary Bergen's help, whom you know, served on this board for many years. And part of the idea there was to just see, hey, what's the nitrate doing? That was the bigger question at the time. And the nitrate upstream was nominal, but brought down to non-detect almost after the first half mile of the reach, because things were just being taken up by the plant matter that was there, even algae and moss in the creek itself, as well as some of the phreatophytes that were there. That was the intent. So we did nitrate speciation there to some degree, and also the general mineral water quality. Because the nitrate tended to be a relatively quick recession, and then be relatively stable, we found good data in the general mineral water quality. So there is some change. It tends to be more from the flora uptake.
Okay. What I was getting at, is there any way to identify what the sources of additional flows to the creek are after it leaves basically the city?
Right. And the quantity of flow was relatively consistent all the way down.
Yeah.
And by the time at Old Creek Road Bridge, it had actually was not flowing at Old Creek Road Bridge. I actually had to crawl under some brush to find the last pond of San Antonio Creek water before it entered in confluence with the Ventura River.
Any other questions? Okay, the next item, thank you, Jordan. The next item is public comments on items not on the agenda. Does anyone have any comments? Anyone on Zoom have any comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the next item, consent agenda, to approval of the minutes for June 9th, 24th, and July 29th, and August 26th.
I don't know what the status of those, Roberta, minutes?
I don't have them available today.
Okay. All right. We'll work at getting those done.
Yes.
Okay, action items, the Treasury's report.
Yeah, I'll just give you a couple update. We had a net change in cash position of a little over $25,000 increase, so it's due to the statements that were mailed out for the last quarter, so we're getting a little revenue. And we will be mailing statements out in October.
A lot went out yesterday,
Okay.
and the rest will go out this weekend.
Okay, good. So we'll continue to see revenue increases over the next 3 months. Last month, our ending bank balance was $60,730. We're up to $86,000, so it's increased at $25,000, as I mentioned. We had about a little over $34,000 of expenses for August. And I think this is a new report. There was our bookkeeper has put a reconciliation summary looking at the checking account. And so those are fairly new pages. I don't recall that being in our previous meetings. Essentially, I would, in a sense, call that a check register, the checks that went out and the amounts. So you'll have that in there. If there's any questions. And lastly, I'm planning to get a reimbursement filing for the grant related to the monitoring well that Jordan was involved with. We have to have that in by October 7th. And so we've got a lot of numbers. Jordan's worked on some things already, and so hopefully that'll help our cash position also when we get reimbursed for those expenses.
And Jerry, just a question on that?
Yes.
And we understand we can do some interim applications, right? We don't have to.
Yes, I did talk to the staff there, and they did say we could make a filing monthly if we want to,
Right,
instead of
just to help
quarterly.
with the cash flow, we can get the interim
Yeah.
applications.
Yeah,
in.
so we'll be doing that as much as we can.
Yeah. That kind of takes the pressure off a little bit on the.
Yes, exactly. And that's all I have. Oh, just lastly, you'll notice in the extraction report, there's nothing for this last quarter yet, but there will be once we get all the extraction statements that have come in for July, August, and September. But so far, without that, we're at 3,257 acre feet for the year. So based upon prior years, we've had somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 acre feet in that same period. So we could be well over 5,000 acre feet of well production this year out of the basin.
But expected for a dry year.
Yes, exactly. That's all I have.
Okay, there's no other comments. We have a motion to approve the Treasury report.
Move approval.
Call the roll.
Director Daddy,
Yes.
Director Thielke. Unmute, please. Can you hear me?
Can they unmute or did you?
He nodded yes.
He nodded.
Yeah.
Director Finch,
Yes.
Director Wyrick,
Yes.
and Chair Hages.
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you.
I think he's internet compromised.
Okay, next item, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Status Report.
Good afternoon, Chair Hages and Board. We have an update today on the GSP. So included in your board packet today are the GSP key concept slides. There are about 30 slides. We've gone over a majority of the slides in previous board meetings. But in the interest in time today, we're going to just review Chapter 3, the Sustainable Management Criteria. And the intent is just get board affirmation for what is currently proposed in the administrative draft GSP that you've been presented, chapters 1 through 5, prior to issuing that for public comment. For lowering of groundwater levels, the sustainability goal that applies to all sustainable management criteria is to preserve the quantity and quality of groundwater in the Ojai Valley groundwater basin in order to protect and maintain the long-term water supply for the common benefit of water users. This stems from the enabling legislation that was Senate Bill 534. The specific undesirable results could occur if groundwater levels drop to levels no longer able to support overlying beneficial uses. The measurable objective is groundwater levels at representative monitoring points to stabilize and recover after each drought period in average and wet years. And this is the, on the right here, is the hydrograph from the late 40s to present for the Elrod well. Jordan presented earlier some updated data through this year for this particular well, but as you can see, there's been specific droughts during this period, and after each subsequent drought, you get recovery of groundwater levels. For the minimum threshold, which is the red line here, is the historical low groundwater level based on 1951 levels in the Elrod well. For other representative monitoring points that are available in the basin, there's not data that extends back to the 50s, but we do have data from 2016, which is the most recent historical low we've essentially applied a 10% correction factor. The water levels in 1951 were approximately 10% lower at this particular well in 2015, 2016. Are there any specific questions on the proposed minimum threshold for groundwater levels in the basin?
Chair?
Any other questions on that?
I have a
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to kind of need you to go back and say something again. You talked about the 51, 52 level.
Yes.
And then you briefly said the 15, 16 level. Something exceeded the 15, 16 level. I didn't get that where I'm looking at the chart and I wanted to correlate
Sure.
to what that 15, 16, 51, 52 statement was again.
Right. So essentially, the minimum threshold for the basin is being established based on the historical low groundwater level that was observed in the basin. And there's really only one well that extends over a long enough period of time to document that in the 1950s or 1951 when that occurred. So if we look at the 1951 groundwater level and compare it to the lowest historical level that occurred late 2015, early 2016, that it was 10% lower than the 2015-16 level. So in order to establish minimum thresholds for other wells in the basin, this is just one of approximately 7 that will be used moving forward, that we had to apply a correction factor, if you will, of approximately 10%. So when you see in the GSP the minimum threshold for other well representative monitoring points in the basin, you'll see that they're lower than the historical low, and that's because we've applied this 10% correction factor in order to get the minimum threshold.
Okay, I got a couple follow-up questions.
Sure.
I'm not understanding the relevance between 52 and why we wouldn't be using something closer to 1960 after Casitas got online. 1952, there were no alternative sources. And so groundwater was a source. There wasn't any ability to pump water up and have that. And so it appears we're looking at two different things. One, you could continue to pump in 1960, and you could draft off Casitas in 1960. And then I guess when we get to the minimum threshold and the bounce back, I'm very concerned about the 1 year, when more than 1 year, when we have, we bounce back. I would think that 1 year would be 3, 4, 5 years, a longer span than the 1 year. I don't see that correlation. The other last thing I would have to say that I'd like to see a tie-in is 576 feet is cool, but what does that equate to in acre feet? So I can understand the relative amount. And of course, I don't expect an answer right this second, but I'm saying, you know, as I look at these 4 different items, I'm not able to draw a picture that tells me what's going on and where we should be. I don't want to project what we're going to do and when we ring the bell based on things that are different than what we're using as our starting point, and they are definitely different. So anyhow, that's what my thought process is.
It seemed like I thought you were going one way in your comments, but then in the move towards 62 or whatever, you're actually moving to raise the minimum threshold. And I think 59 actually showed that it can go down there and we can get from it. So I'm for 59. My comment would almost go the other way, but you know, who's to say we couldn't go 5% below that? You know, so I'm with you on there. You know, where the threshold is. I also think that the multi-year averaging
Yeah, I think I could use maybe Elrod well as one example. I mean, each well is going to be unique, but you can see in this case that the top of the well screen is the dash line, and the bottom of the well screen is also provided here as a dash line. So in this particular case, you will be pumping within the screen under the minimum threshold scenario. So there is, a probability that the yield of the well is going to decline due to these declining water levels. So you might not be able to get the complete yield out that you previously did, but we don't really have, specific information on that at this point in time.
And as a pumper from the basin, I think that's, how the basin has always kind of self-regulated before any of the GSP. Some wells, their straws aren't deep enough, and others don't pump as much. And, I think that's where this, minimum threshold, and I'm for leaving it there, not raising it up. If you were working on a 3-year average, 1 year you'd be above it, the next year you're at it, the next year you're below it, you're still at the average. And then as long as, you get that wet year following year, you pop back up to it. I think that's because I deal in an adjudicated basin already, on a 3-year rolling average. Because dry years hit and you have to pump harder, but, it's that, the average that we watch.
I just want to clarify, the minimum threshold is the 1952 Elrod well, correct?
Yes, it's based on the lowest groundwater level recorded in 1951 at the Elrod well.
September 11th, 1951.
Okay, so it is that well, and in acre feet, that represents 41,000 acre feet of remaining storage, correct?
It's about 10% below that.
Okay.
The 41,000 acre feet is based on the model period, and the model period doesn't extend that far back. I have that on the next slide, but it's about, it's roughly ends up being closer to 37,000 acre feet is what's estimated, but it really hasn't been modeled at this point in time.
Okay. And if any of the 7 wells reach the minimum threshold, is that undesirable, or is it a majority of the monitoring wells, or just the Elrod well?
Right. So if the basin, if a majority of those water levels in the 7 representative monitoring points were to exceed the minimum threshold, then there's the potential for undesirable results to occur. It doesn't mean that they actually will occur, but there is a potential for them to occur. And getting back kind of to the 1 year time period, it's really meant to give the board a year to react and potentially implement some of the projects and management actions that are described in Chapter 4. So, for instance, if you were to exceed the minimum threshold for a year, at that point in time, the board could consider something like an allocation plan at that point in time. So, as we describe in Chapter 4, there is a nexus with an exceedance of the minimum threshold and potentially implementing some of the projects and management actions.
And we would have the choice of acting sooner, like in a 3-year, if we were looking at over 3 years, we stayed level, we didn't gain or lose, we might start talking about implementing something versus, a hard, you can't pump anymore when we reach a certain level.
Right. There's nothing in the GSP that would restrict you from continuing to pump if you exceed it to the minimum threshold. It's really to give a signal to the board and to the stakeholders that we now have exceeded the historical low water level at a representative monitoring point or majority of the points in the basin, and it really is to trigger action. And what that action can be is really at the discretion of the board, but there are specific projects and management actions in the plan that could be considered.
Chair? Casitas came online in 60, is that correct?
59, I don't think they started delivering any substantial amount of water until mid-60s.
60s, like 65?
Yeah, somewhere in there, yeah.
And I thought somewhere way back in the recesses of my mind that there was like this staggering amount of acre feet that was done, 40, 50 years ago, like 15, 20, 30,000 acre feet, some massive amount. What was the high yield of Casitas in delivering water?
It was the highest delivery time. Yeah, it was like 24 to 25,000 acre feet.
Okay, well,
But that was in the 70s.
okay. I think they would have a significant amount of backup in water delivery where people would or wouldn't need to pump depending on what was available. And so
Yeah.
then again, that 1 year is the thing that really makes me,
Well, it potentially could be the difference between 1952 and 2016, because we did have Casitas in 2016. And one of the management actions that's in the plan is a conjunctive use program with Casitas to deal with this.
Right, you took the words out of my mouth. That's an important part. Once this is set, that informs the conjunctive use plan as a parameter.
Yeah, that
And,
yeah.
so that's why I think it makes sense, like Mr. Finch was saying, where it's at.
We need this type of minimum threshold really to develop a
Exactly.
good conjunctive use plan. Right now, we don't have any parameters for that, so.
Yeah, I would just add that, this could be considered a provisional minimum threshold that, as you get into GSP implementation and start monitoring the 7 representative monitoring points and collecting more data, you may want to revise it at a future GSP update, which would be in about 5 years.
Yeah, I think what's important for 1952 actually happened and the basin recovered. So whether or not reduced pumping in 1952 was voluntary or they simply ran out of water, the basin recovered.
I believe Mr. Finch has got the answer. It is self-limiting. When it goes below the straw, it just takes care of itself. It's self-limiting, and it just shuts it off, and that's it. And there's a few people pumping. And I think there is a way for us to get those numbers and study that so we would know as the next plan goes down the road. So.
Okay? Go ahead.
For groundwater and storage, the measurable objective is the same as for groundwater and levels, and that is to stabilize and recover after each drought period. The minimum threshold for groundwater and storage is to remain above the historical low, approximately 41,000 acre feet in 2016, and again, there is a initial correction applied of about 10% lower in 1951, so that's roughly 37,000 acre feet. So if you can see, this figure here looks at inflows and outflows to the basin in the bar charts, but the line with the circles is looking at the change in groundwater and storage. This is the model period from 1971 to 2019, so obviously it doesn't go back to the 1950s. But the most recent historical low was 2016, and the model predicts that's 41,310 acre feet. And the historical high occurred in 1983 with approximately 84,000 acre feet in storage. Are there any questions with the groundwater and storage thresholds?
Well, I'll just note that the legend for dry, average, and wet isn't real clear in terms of the color bars.
Okay. Yeah, I think that may be an issue with.
Maybe we could hatch or do patterns instead of just relying on color or something.
Sure.
Or, I just, it's an important element, and it's hard to apprehend just looking at that, the legend for dry, average, wet.
Yeah, we'll look at the specific figures in the GSP as
It's
well.
just a style thing.
And see if that's also an issue, but it may just be that we're screenshotting these from figures in the GSP and the way they're being displayed on PowerPoint.
Okay, any questions or comments on that slide? Okay.
The next sustainable management criteria is for water quality. Undesirable results for degraded water quality is if quality were no longer able to support overlying beneficial use. The measurable objective for water quality is identified as constituents of concern to exhibit stable or improving trend. In addition, the Los Angeles Basin Plan water quality objectives for the Ojai Valley groundwater basin will be adopted, provided there is a nexus between groundwater extraction and the groundwater quality impairment. The minimum threshold is to maintain constituents of concern below maximum contaminant levels specified in Title 22 Code of Regulations. Also, provided there is a nexus between groundwater extraction and the groundwater quality impairment. Are there any questions regarding the proposed sustainable management criteria for water quality?
No question on the content, but this one goes back to, I thought we had this discussion on the heading. Why is it degraded water quality versus just water quality?
Right.
Yeah, we went through
Because
that.
I saw another GSP for Fillmore-Piru Basin, and they're not in the negative.
All of the terminology provided in the GSP and the slides are specific to the nomenclature and definitions of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I think in the slides, it's fine to redact some of the nomenclature, but in the GSP itself, I think it's really important that this is a check-the-box exercise.
Template you're working from?
We are using all the nomenclature and definitions within the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So an undesirable result as defined by SGMA.
No, I get that line.
Right.
It's the heading.
Yeah, it's the title, not the undesirable reward, degraded water quality, I
That's
understand.
fine.
It's the title.
Right, and the end, that is the title of the undesirable result in the SGMA legislation. So we're just, when we're looking at the chronic lowering of groundwater levels or reduction of groundwater and storage, we're not making those definitions up. Those are defined.
No, that's the definition, but why can't it just say water quality, and then the undesirable reward, degraded water quality is no longer, why can't it just do that?
We can do that in the slides, but I think that when we are looking at the text of the GSP itself, that we just need to be careful that we are applying the requirements of SGMA in the text.
But it seems like we want quality water. Anyway. I mean,
Oh, I concur. I mean,
We're just talking about a title, we're not talking about
Yeah.
definitions.
Anyway.
Right.
It sounds like the state wants it in the negative.
Well, and again, that's maybe what they want, and I don't really care what they want. What are the absolute rules?
We also don't want them to look at ours.
Now,
with a
I get it,
evil eye.
but I'm looking at 4 pages, and let me start out with what they are. Chronic reduction, degraded, depletion.
Yeah, no.
So we go through these slides, and we get underwater, and it just seems like what we're doing is we're saying negative, 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 negative.
Yeah,
I don't
I don't
believe
think
it's
Jim is
negative.
questioning being in compliance with SGMA and with the standards of SGMA. I don't understand how SGMA dictates a title to a section. you can still be
yeah.
consistent with the definition.
I think the thing you have to understand is what this GSP, how, the whole concept is to do things to avoid these negative these negative results.
Of course.
So these are the negative results we want to avoid. If you read the text, you'll see that in every case, it states that the Ojai Basin has not experienced degraded water quality. The Ojai Basin has not experienced overdraft. So, there's a statement for each one of these that basically states that's not the case here.
Yeah, the entire premise of Sigma was, based on a historical drought that occurred throughout California, where they saw all these negative conditions occurring predominantly in the Central Valley, but in other basins throughout the state. So it's not, the regulations are not basin specific. They were meant to be broad, and they really were meant to address a depletion of groundwater systems at the state level. They weren't really.
But I think what
addressed
Jim's
for
trying to say is
specific
the title.
basins.
The title could say water quality, then the undesirable result is degraded water quality, no longer able to. It's a psychological style thing, but I understand his point. It's how you set up the initial perception. We're talking about water quality in general. What's the undesirable result of the water quality issue? But I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I making sense? Is that?
Yes.
You do, but it's, maybe we're just looking at it, we look at it from the opposite lens, which I think is sad that the state came at it from that
Yeah.
standpoint.
Well, I'm happy to update the key concept slides with terminology that, it's really meant more for the layperson to understand this stuff. So
I think that's what Jim's point is.
happy
We're trying to get the layperson.
update these key concept slides to make them more approachable and understandable for the
Well,
layperson,
if
and not.
that's the case, then absolutely, this is about water quality. This whole slide is about water quality.
Right. Right. It's about water quality.
The undesirable result, I would have worked at it from the opposite. The desired result is above, water better than this, but you guys can work from the
But
negative.
that's an undesirable result. That makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, but
Anyway, it's just
it's,
the presentation thing.
Yeah, I think if there was something in it, for example, either it's avoid degraded water quality or prevent degraded water quality, so that we know that our goal is not to have this happen.
but this slide is on water quality, and then everything under it is on how to avoid degraded water.
Yeah.
quality.
Point taken.
It's a syntax issue, and
Right.
it's
Well, you're gonna love the next slide then.
no, not gonna like that one either.
Well, what that syntax is gonna leave the general public with a negative declaration on everything. And so they're gonna come at
Right,
this
and that's
thing
the
with a
point.
negative
Yes,
declaration.
that was what
And
I
then we're
thought.
gonna have to say,
The
but
category is water quality.
they're gonna read the first three words, and they're not gonna read the third paragraph,
The
which
the
says,
category is
and
water
none of this
quality.
exists.
Yeah.
Not degrade, that's
They
not the
won't get there.
category, degraded water quality, or the category is water quality.
Correct.
And we're not trying to beat you up. I just own a newspaper and I know how people are idiots. Because we put things in there and you should see the comments we get. And it's like, oh.
Oh, yeah, it
so
drives
now
me nuts,
we-
some of your headlines, because that's how people
Now we really need to
read.
change everything. so.
Yeah.
I don't want to put the quarters in, I just want to read the headlines through the glass.
That's correct.
Yeah,
You're the guy.
I get a call from someone that read the headline, I go, what, that had nothing to do
You're the
with it.
guy shaking the paper.
Trey, Peter Candy, do you feel like you can work with this? I mean, I think you understand what the board's sentiment is. At the same time,
Some water.
we don't want to be approving and submitting a plan that is going to get rejected by the Department of Water Resources because it doesn't meet, basic Sigma requirements. And I think the struggle here is that you're trying to set the plan up in a way that meets these check the box requirements of the statute. and the board has concerns with the way some of this language is phrased. And so that's the tension. Do you feel like there's a way to meet the board's desires and at the same time put together a plan that meets Sigma requirements in the eyes of DWR?
Yes, Peter, I think we need to kind of bifurcate the text of the body of the GSP, which is really chapters 1 through 5, from maybe the executive summary and the key concept presentation. And in fact, Sigma calls for using plain spoken language in the executive summary and in the presentation. So I understand now what the direction is. I think we can revise both the presentation key concepts and the executive summary to agree better with the preferred verbiage of the board and text, and that really all the definitions of Sigma will be in the body of the chapters. And I think that way, if it's a pretty large report, and I suspect that most of the public is not going to read all 1,000+ pages with the appendices. So they'll really focus in on the executive summary and that high-level layperson description of what's going on in the plan. And I think that that'll be essential, that that information represents the board's desires.
Okay, it sounds like you understand what the problem is, and you got an approach to addressing it. That's what I'm hearing.
Peter.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions?
Not on chapter 3.
We just have one last slide here.
You already know how we're gonna.
I'm just gonna say
say
interconnected
depletion?
surface water, groundwater
The
surface
title.
water.
Just have the title, interconnected surface water, yeah.
Well, that depletion kind of reminds me of Iraq War, depleted uranium. That's the only other depletion I usually. So
Yeah,
crazy.
same point, obviously.
In this one should just interconnection of surface
Mhm.
water.
Yes, I think probably surface water, groundwater interconnection.
So- Yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
Sure. And Jordan did an excellent job presenting earlier on this issue. Really, the existing information indicates that San Antonio Creek is separated from the principal production aquifers by intervening clay aquatards. Surface water does not appear to be impacted by groundwater extractions.
That's great.
Continued monitoring of groundwater levels and stream flow and implementation of proposed projects and management actions will improve the understanding of the stream aquifer interactions. And as Jordan presented earlier, that's being developed real time. I think there's conclusive information that really shows that this perched aquifer in the graphic is likely being sustained by return flows and just infiltration on the basin floor, and that the data shows both the groundwater level data and the water quality data that this is a separate aquifer than the deeper production aquifers.
So here, interconnectivity of surface water.
Or lack of interconnectivity.
yeah,
Lack
I
of
mean-
interconnectivity.
When you're actually describing what you're describing in your paragraphs, Bob's right.
Yeah, I like the paragraph.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's lack of interconnectivity.
Well, or just,
Or question,
It's the relationship.
there you go.
yeah,
That's the right word. Relationship of surface and groundwater.
yeah,
Does not exist.
No, just let the paragraph speak, just
just capture the paragraph,
capture the paragraph.
yeah. The best headline.
Well, in conclusion, that's the meat of the groundwater sustainability plan for sustainable management criteria. If there are any other questions on the 31 plus slides that were provided with the agenda package, I'm happy to take any questions on those.
Yes, I have one. It would really help me, and I have to go back and find this map. We have a map that shows the perched water area. It's kind of got the little jagged kind of zipper stuff. And it doesn't really have any road designations, and it would really help if there were some other landmarking to where you could get an idea of, hey, this is where the perch starts along this axiom, these are where these roads are. And it gives it is on page 14. So when I take a look at the northern edge and I take a look at the southern edge here, which goes quite a bit east, I really don't have a grid where I can figure out.
Can you lay this onto Google Earth?
Sure, we can certainly provide
Provide both.
better landmarks in this map, so it's more obvious.
The ideal would be to just lay it onto Google Earth.
Yeah, we'll put an aerial on here and see what it looks like, and if that works, then we'll go with the aerial or some other sort of base map that better shows landmarks.
And I don't want to do it just to do it. I want to do it for a reason.
Oh, yeah.
Because east and west of that demarc line is a huge, my understanding of what we've been talking about, a hugely different system. One, we're going to get on the east end, we're going to get perk and we're going to get fast recharge. On the west side, it's going to hit that hard pan and the other, the perch, and it's going to go off and it's going to do an entire different dynamic. So I just kind of think it would really be nice to have this so it's identifiable.
And on to that point, if I'm just looking at this as just looking at it, does that imply that the northern boundary connects to where, because I don't think that's true, that the rest of the boundary is the same? In other words, as if you're trying to get a circle around the perched aquifer boundaries, this is just the northern boundary. Is there a western and a southern?
No, the western, it goes forever, west.
It daylights out.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is up there at Stewart Canyon, for example, it's showing a connection
Bedrock problem.
before, as you go west to Stewart Canyon.
There's not much there.
Right, when you're, and
And
Jordan
there- and
can jump into,
the perched
but,
aquifer is
there's
entire-
likely, when you start getting up into the Stewart Canyon, into the Topa Mountains, there's likely some areas where you're getting recharge and there's not perched
Well, that's
aquifer.
really Stewart Creek. That's my question. Does it end, does the western boundary end before Stewart Creek?
And there are some bedrock highs in that location, so you're likely not going to have these lacustrine deposits up in that area. But Jordan, do you have anything to add there?
I think I'll simply say that in that westernmost portion, and especially the northern portion of the basin, the Arboleda area of the city,
Right.
You basically have boulders on top of bedrock.
Okay.
And the perch system, while it's correlative, has a little bit different character.
Okay.
In the southern and eastern portions of the perched aquifer, it's the gravels on top of clay.
Okay.
Whereas in the west, it's boulders on top of bedrock.
Okay.
So it effectively does the same thing hydrologically, in that water that percolates to the bottom of the boulders or gravels hits that lower permeability zone,
Right.
either clay on the east or bedrock on the west,
Right.
and funnels down towards sand.
And so that's sort of my point, when you're talking about the Arboleda, where we have septic systems, is that infiltration contributing to the perched aquifer and the stream flow perching?
Sure.
And the point is is that clear from this map, in other words? Because that's the other side of Stewart Creek.
I think part of the problem is that the further up Stewart Canyon you go, it's like Jordan was saying, where I live, the purge zone is about a half-inch thick.
Right, that's kind
And
of
it's
what
all
I'm
clay.
getting to.
And some of that area, Arboleda, where there are septic systems, they have problems with them because of just that fact. So there's not much there, I don't think.
I'm just asking whether this is as clear as it can be regarding the nature of the perched aquifer.
I think we could
Impactful boundaries.
I think we could potentially hatch an area. This is really showing the estimated northern extent. It might be more clear to the reader if we were to use some kind of hatch that kind of showed the entire theoretical or proposed extent of the perch based on existing well logs.
Does that make sense, Jordan? Okay. All right, great. Thank you. So it gives you an enclosed, view of the primary impactful area. Because I suspect, and this is where it's also, like Bob's saying, it's important, I suspect it's concentrated in the city limits of Ojai. And I think that's important to try to depict.
Yeah, and really that it boils down to material management of the system.
That's what I'm saying. That's connecting it to policy implications and project implications down the road.
And so, Director Wyrick, having said that, it
Yeah.
appears
I'm a little nervous about
some
where you're going
places
now, Bob.
within the city, it is a waste of money and effort
Excuse me?
to go ahead and put in these recharge zones that we know are not going to
There's a
recharge.
grant out there right now.
They're
looking
simply
at that
just
and
going to go
coming
to the perched, and that's it.
Exactly.
Okay, but we have people that are expecting that this water is going to go all the way in, and it's really not. At all.
That's the point, right. I agree. So I think it's a good direction to go to have a little bit more of a enveloped
It'll help.
hatch area.
It'll help the stream.
But not.
Yeah,
It'll help people feel good.
And
Yeah.
That's
most
right.
important.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on the slides? When is our public hearing set?
Yeah, that's correct.
December 9th.
December 9th. And then there's 30-day comment period? Is that correct?
Yes, we expect to have a full draft to the board by October 15th. And then barring no additional comments on that draft, the 30-day comment period could start shortly thereafter.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why I didn't ask this. Bruce, you're involved in the Upper Ventura one. What are your comments on our discussion on the syntax and stuff, and how is yours reading? I haven't seen it.
We're sticking with Sigma language.
So is this exactly how, kind of in the negative, in the...
We're just using the Sigma.
Okay, because the other one I saw didn't have
I
it.
don't think anyone's made a point about that.
Okay.
So
Oh, thank you. That's
I
interesting.
would like to make one comment as an individual on your plan here.
Go ahead.
It seems to me that for a sense of completeness in determining your connection between surface and groundwater, it would be helpful to have a no pumping scenario to show a difference between pumping levels and what you have right now, or non-pumping levels. Looks like you've grandfathered in 4,000 acre feet of pumping a year, which results in water tables that shows basically a separation between the aquifers, the confined aquifers, and the perch zone. If you didn't have any pumping, what would the relationship be between inflow of the basin and outflow? Or if you started pumping 1,000 acre feet a year, what would the flow down San Antonio Creek be? If you pump 2,000 acre feet a year, what would it be? 3,000? Anyway, it showed the picture. So I think that would be it'd be helpful to have that part of your analysis when you deal with the fact that we don't know enough right now about the interconnection. And that would kind of help inform some of the work that's Jordan doing with his depth discrete monitoring and things like that. Because
I'm seeing an itchy finger on Jordan.
we look at unimpaired in our basin, and we have a kind of a graphic where you can show what the flows in the river would be along a cross-section with pumping and without pumping. So you can see kind of the relationship between the two and where the pumping can draw down certain areas and stuff like that. So anyway, just a thought. I think it'd be helpful to have that in the plan.
And thank you, Bruce. We can certainly flesh that out, but in a way, we have a no pumping condition. We've seen it in recent years that are wet years, 2019, 2020. And I showed that in the graph that we put together, where water levels in the key well are rising significantly. And what you'll notice in that period is that there are not pumping cycles, at least with that well and others that have interference with that particular well. Conversely, you see San Antonio Creek receding and no longer flowing across the basin. So flushing that out, we could model it or we could measure it.
No, it would,
We've been measuring it
no,
a long time.
I think I get where Bruce is going, and I think it is more of, you can only model it, unless the East End goes out of business. And your district stops pumping water out of the things, because
Right.
so it's got to be a theoretical. But, I think the question in our understanding, Bob's and mine, is even if you didn't pump it, flows in the creek aren't going to change the way I understand it. Now, you're the expert, I'm not. But that's what I think Bruce is asking, that would be would your scientific conclusion come to the same as my stupid conclusion?
I think the best scientific conclusions are understood by folks of all degrees of mentality.
Yeah, no, but, my layman's thing is just, the way I'm understanding it, I don't think it would have much impact. But you doing it via a model, you tell us.
And really, I'd rather measure what I can than
Right.
model.
Okay.
And that's the key about.
You're the geologist.
I think that's the key about a lot of the management
Drop 10 feet.
scenarios and strategies that the OBGMA has always implemented, is that, and why, we've had a model for 10 years and used it twice. The basin, and really the watershed, responds so quickly to precipitation and is so well responsive in water levels and creek flows and things of that nature that by the time you can measure something, by the time you can model something, the measurement you could have taken yesterday would have told you more. And that's where I'm going with the idea of like the no pumping scenario that we have almost annually in the springs when it's wet, in normal years or really wet years, is that we're not pumping, but we see the same patterns in the surface flow. And we see the same predictable patterns in the groundwater levels response. And of course, we can flesh this out more, and certainly some degree of modeling could be potentially directed toward that effort. But I think the idea is that the more we understand, the more we measure, the less modeling we have to do, and the model comes with more uncertainty.
I do have one question on that unimpaired scenario. In that case, are we simply stopping pumping and all of the ag remains but is irrigated with an imported water, or if there's no ag in that scenario? Because, if you're removing this...
No city and no ag.
There's no ag.
So it's just an undeveloped scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like, it's just to understand the hydrology of the basin, I think, is what the point is. So if you take a whole body diagram there, whatever inflow, if you don't have any pumping, inflow equals outflow, basically. So you're not pumping 4,000 acre feet a year, then 4,000 acre feet a year is gonna flow down San Antonio Creek.
No,
No.
Where's it gonna
No,
go?
not even
Where's it gonna
close.
go in the
No.
basin?
it's not gonna happen at all.
It'll
Where
just
does the
stay in
water
the
go?
ground.
We've gone through the scenario about the separation. I'll let them do that, but no, that's,
I'm just-
no, you're not, no, they're not proportional, and that'll never happen.
The point is that if it's, a real high-level concept is that if there's no pumping, then the basin is full, and it stays full, and what comes in goes out effectively as surface flow.
Yeah.
And that's not so the groundwater, basically the whole system becomes only the perched.
It's a stormwater flow issue then.
It's a pass over.
Yeah, and that's not suggesting that there should be a cutback in pumping or anything like that. I'm just saying it's an idea, a way to understand the hydrology and how the basin operates, and it may help understanding the basin.
But I think what Jordan is saying is that's not how the hydrology works.
Yeah, because we do extract water, and there is.
Reject my comment and-
Well, no, I'm just
there is
saying that's,
storage.
Oh, no.
It's a good discussion.
Just don't understand the purpose.
Yeah.
If we're gonna have this meeting December 9th, when and where? Somebody started to say we've got a December 9th public meeting. and I didn't hear that comment finished.
Go ahead.
We, based upon information that Trey has put together and Roberta's, you've already sent the notice to the paper and we published, right?
Yes.
So we published in the paper based upon direction from the board, I think at the last meeting. We haven't specifically, we said here, I think we
Yes.
said at this location and it was,
Yeah.
and it was gonna be 3 PM.
Okay.
I had time uncertain.
Yeah. But we'll have
I
to notice it.
apologize, it
Yep.
just slipped my mind. I'll get in a better habit with this.
And we'll
Time.
have to notice it as a special meeting, and we'll primarily focus on groundwater sustainability plan and any public comments. Unless the board well, we still got, next month or next couple months, we need to talk about November, December, and I think you had somewhat indicated you might want to try and have something in November, even though Thanksgiving is around the normal board meeting time. And in December, we usually do something early so we don't get into the later part of December.
Well, I think that we potentially could get some significant comments that are going to take time to address, so we want to make sure we have enough time to discuss those and determine how we're going to address them before we have, hopefully before we have the public workshop.
Yeah, if we get the draft available and the board's willing to release it, we get it out as soon as possible. And that way, hopefully, members of the public can comment both written and at the meeting. And then we'll have that, hopefully we'll have that early on, and maybe we can even address some of those comments early on as part of the public hearing.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments? Anything from the public? Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Trey. Appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
Yes,
It's great
I do too.
Great to see you all.
Yeah.
It's easier when you're here.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Well, we're making progress. Okay, the next item is the term of our CFD board representative is up, and Bob Daddy is the alternate that replaced me as the board representative. And he's indicated that he is interested in continuing to serve. We've had no one else indicate they want to do this, so I would entertain a unanimous approval of Bob Daddy if there's no objections.
I concur.
I concur.
Okay, just call the roll just in
Peter,
case.
just nod your head.
Yeah, nod your head, Peter.
Or a thumb, there we go.
There you go.
For the record, can we get a first and second and then roll call just to keep
So
it
move.
nice? Okay,
Second.
thank you.
He gave a thumb up.
He gave a thumb.
Yeah.
Director Daddy,
Yes.
Director Finch,
Yes.
Director Wyrick,
Yes.
and Chair Hages.
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
We also have a vacancy for the alternate, and we put out a notice to have anyone interested apply. And we had one application, is that correct, Roberta?
Yes.
And the application was from John Whaley, who resides in the CFD and meets all the qualifications for the position. And is, I've known him for quite a while. He expressed a real interest in doing this, so. Unless there's other nominees?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, call the roll.
Director Thielke? Nod, please.
Thumb?
Thumb?
Up?
Or thumbs down.
Yeah, either one.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Director Daddy,
Yes.
Director Finch,
Yes.
Director Wyrick,
Yes.
and Chair Hages.
Yes.
Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, we have two information items. The first one, Peter can address if he likes, but it's basically the result of inquiries various interests that want to access some of OBGMA's data, and we're simply trying to make sure that anyone that wants access gets the same opportunity. So Peter prepared this opinion on that. If you have anything else on that, Peter?
No, this has to do with the groundwater model that Daniel B. Stevens and Associates developed on OBGMA's behalf with various grant monies and cost sharing by OBGMA. And we've had a couple of requests now that the modeling data and information, well, I would say not requests, just inquiries as to the nature of the modeling data and information and whether or not that's public information, part of the public domain or not. So that spurred a internal conversation, and after looking at it, checking and talking with various people, it seems like, everything that was done is part of the public domain. But before just, deciding that internally, we wanted to notify the board members, make sure, none of the board members had a problem with that. And if they do, please say so, and we can talk about it. But otherwise, the information to be treated as part of the public domain and fair game for anybody who wants to use it as part of their expert disclosure, discovery, expert witness process in the Ventura River adjudication.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
And so, yeah, if there's no board concerns over that, then that'll be the way it is.
So you talked to Daniel B. Stevens, and it's not like it's copyrighted in essence.
I did not speak with Daniel B. Stevens.
Associates or whatever.
No, I spoke with the various parties that were interested in acquiring the information or just checking to make sure that OBGMA wasn't intending to assert any proprietary rights over it.
Yeah.
And that's as far as the inquiry went. We also looked at, so how is this all developed? And, as far as I'm aware, all the data and information is already on OBGMA's website. So it seemed like counterintuitive that OBGMA would be asserting, proprietary rights to the information. Now, the actual model itself, there may be proprietary aspects of that Daniel B. Stevens isn't willing to release, but that's up to Daniel B. Stevens. OBGMA doesn't have any interest in the model itself other than, what the data that was used to, in the model runs and that corresponding outputs and reports that were prepared. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was wondering. The intellectual property, they kind of.
Yeah, I think the model itself is, I think the state had a lot to do with developing it, yeah.
Yeah, mine too.
If someone were to come to us, OBGMA, and ask for the model itself, we'd have to direct them to Daniel B. Stevens and Associates. But as far as I'm aware, the extent of the inquiries has been, it's the information that was input into the model and the modeling results. Do we have any interest in asserting proprietary rights to that? And it's already out in the public domain.
Peter, I would just add that DUDEC does have all of the model files. It's a coupled model, so there's a surface water model and a groundwater flow model. The surface water model is built on DB Stevens' proprietary code. The groundwater flow model is built on ModFlow, which is United States Geological Survey code, so that's open source.
All right, that's helpful. Thanks, Trey.
So do you need a motion here or just
No.
concurrence?
No, just, we put it on the agenda as an informational
Okay.
item and to see, you know, if there's any issues or problems that board members have, and if so, then we could pull it off and agendize it, you know, for possibly next meeting, something like that. But if there's no concerns, then there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, Peter, I just wanted to chime in real quick, just so the board's knowledge. I think Richard's probably well aware of this. The Public Records Act says we're typically required to provide any data and reports we have available,
Right.
but we're not required to create reports. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, we want all these reports, we'll say, well, we'll give you what we have available, but we don't have to go in there and create anything.
That's a good point, John. Thanks.
Okay, if there's no further questions on that, the next item is the Ojai Days booth we're going to have. Roberta has a sign-up sheet if any of you would like to volunteer to spend an hour or two in the booth.
It's going to be a smaller scale event out of the street, so may get actually get more traffic.
So the street's not going to be blocked?
Oh, no?
No, we're not, it's going to be a smaller scale deal. It's certainly very minimal on the street, if any, and much more focused on Libby Park, and much more focused on local interest things, and not just sort of, you know, everybody and their cousin that wants to come up and sell stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if I'd
So
know
It's
anybody.
going to be more of a community focus. Yeah, so it's going to be a little different character event, and
Okay.
and it may help with more eyes on this.
We can bring our cylinder that you've seen in those,
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
in those
Yeah.
presentations, so that you can have that to talk about.
It's a great idea.
Okay,
I'm gonna guess it's about 70 pounds.
Yeah, okay.
It's doable.
Not
Couple
too bad.
people can carry it then.
yeah.
Couple old guys.
All right, well, let Roberta know. It's October 16th.
Yeah, I should be available. I'll come up.
Okay, any other business? If not, we're adjourned at 4:22, or 42.
42.
All right. Oh, that's all right.